Hello everyone, welcome again to another Cultura Rasa exploration. As always, we'll look at societal systems, which are really the worlds of culture, from different angles every time I make one of these videos. Today, I would like to explore zones of society. I'm particularly interested in zones of society that exist in the objective world, okay? Because each one of us can have different stories and worlds in our heads, and even societies of different sorts, friendships of different sorts. We can know about people that we might not directly interact with, whether through movies, whether through song, poetry, whether written by ourselves or somebody else. And they can be in our heads. I'm interested in the zones of society that we can observe in the objective world, and more so that we create collaborations with in the objective world, with the individuals that we know in the objective world. So one particular aspect of societies of the objective world, as we would put it, is that they're governed by laws. Okay? Now, in more official contexts of a societal grid, we got laws, but in more subtle societies, such as, say, a friendship, those usually are rules, and there's always a sliding scale of how strong a specific rule becomes, in which case it might become a law. Right? And I explored in my writings through Forces of Society how societies have different levels, or better to say, the emergent systems that created them were expressed in forms of levels as I explore them. Today I'm gonna explore predominantly just the zones of society with their levels as they are, as I've explored before. I just wanted to point out that this is one new angle now where we're going to be exploring it like this. Emerging zones of societal legitimacy. That is what I mean by laws. There needs to be a legitimacy to a specific rule, so you can call upon it, for example. Okay? I like to call these zones tunnels of existence in sort of a larger, broader context. So it's basically the physical world prevents you from, say, running into a tree, whereas a societal world with its rules and laws will prevent, it's almost like there's an invisible barrier, so it will prevent you from being able to step into certain areas that are legislated for different things. Okay, they're built out of emerged needs of the human animal. Okay, so all our needs that are expressed through our bodies shape the societies. So remember that. Now, who is allowed to participate and what are the criteria? Do you qualify? I'll be exploring on how different zones of society have different acceptance levels, if you will, or times where you're allowed to express yourself within them in some form or another, and times where you're not. Moving entity that outlines the emerged and ever-renewed orbit of its own existence. Okay? So that's another thing to remember, is that these zones are always recreated day in and day out. The next day, tomorrow morning, we wake up in the morning and we outline the shape of the zones of societies consistently. And that creates sort of like an orbit of its own. Just like we like to explain how an atom has an orbit within which it spins, similarly, we create our own orbits, which is really the zones. The orbit is a silly word to use in the context of societal movement, if you will, but I personally would use it, but to avoid any kind of misunderstanding, I chose the word zone. And zones of societal responsibility. But bear in mind that every time there's a law that is involved, the law is putting responsibility into somebody's hands. So somebody's responsible to, well, either uphold the law and as well to bear the consequences if things don't go according to the way the law would have designated it. Okay. Now, quickly, I'm going to show 5 different graphs. There's more, but 5 predominant graphs of different zones of society that I will explore through this video. Number 1 is the society itself. Okay. The need to exist as a social animal amongst other animals in a social group. And quickly, I will show this is the area, and all the dots that you see are the different places that we can find ourselves with different houses, and I'll get into exploring more of that. The next one is mating, coupling, or family. Okay, it's the same, really. It's just that I'm focusing on a different zone. Technically, we could say that the societal example here, not technically, literally, will include all the other ones, meaning all the ones that are coming up are the ones that are going to be shaping the society itself. Okay, so second one is mating, coupling, and family, which is the contract of marriage. Coming from the need of the body to create offspring. Okay, So the world of mating is specifically going to be contractual, specifically in the world of creating marriage between two people in some form or another. We'll see. It could be a common law imposition, if you will. The third one is traffic, which is a very good one to explore because it's very strict. Yet, there's leeways. It's a body it's because the body wants to move, and then there's the need to transport quickly and efficiently. And just to give two examples, the fact that we want to transport ourselves to large distances is the need. Okay, and the way I represented traffic in this case is like this. And then the dots are where we can be, where we mostly are. You'll see that as I'll explore, there's more dots when there's a stoplight. Sometimes people drive off the curb to go around something. So sometimes I might have exaggerated the amount of dots on the side. But the lines is what I like to call imposed structure. And I didn't point that out already over here. Okay, we'll get to this. That's the imposed structure. And there's a free flow moving around. Okay, in each one of them. And the free flow is you just driving. Okay. Then we've got music, the need to express musically, right? And that one has its grid lines, right? The imposed structure. And then if there's any improvisation elements in the musical arena, then that would be the free flow area or the play zone, okay? And we'll explain that more later. And travel, manufacture, care, health are other examples. And travel would be a one where we have a specific grid line, which is usually like a plan, and then being spontaneous in between, okay? And I'll just point out right away, and we'll explore this, but just to set it in your, kind of like the thoughts in your head, that there's extremes that we'll be exploring at the end, and those are the world of classical music would be an extremely imposed structure, whereas the freeform music would be completely in the world of free flow and play, right? And then with travel is when you plan everything, or you can travel and not plan anything at all, right? Now, laws of human society is what creates societies. It's the world of archy, or the world of rule. Okay? And the archy that humans have evolved in is hierarchy. If it's an egalitarian system, then it's not hierarchical. So egalitarian system technically doesn't have the same kind of laws. They merge just differently. Let's put it that way for now. But I'll be exploring the word of hierarchy to a large degree, because laws are when a governing system creates a rule across the entire societal landscape. And it means sacred rule, which means that zones of society have laws which we treat as the sacred rule. Okay? Legislations of rules and laws are all accomplished through epimemetic tagging, what I like to call operant conditioning. First of all, epimemetic is the word that I like to use to describe the fact that memes get taught into us throughout our upbringing. And once we learn the memes, which is really the rules and laws, or as I like to call them, what you should do for society, they get in different times, let's call them activated or triggered. And that's why I call it epimemetic. Okay? That's epimetic tagging, is that whoever has been tagged to execute a specific meme. Okay? And the way that is done is through operant conditioning. We get conditioned into behaving in this way or the other way in order to create that ability in us. Societal laws, public law, and contracts is how it works in pragmatic world out there. If you want to go exercise law, people can make private agreements, and statute is the word for past written law. So the statutes are what literally keeps the zones of society together. Okay? You get privileges for participating, and you also get restrictions. That's the default. So there's this things that you can't do within once you take the contract of a societal zone, specific societal zone, and there's also privileges, things that you will have the right to do or how to express yourself as I like to really open it up. Public laws. So there's public laws and private laws, and the public maintain the balance in relationship between the public and the governing body. Because the governing body is one force and the public is the force from underneath. We're born into general public law together with the society that we're born into, and many of the laws are imposed onto us by default, without us necessarily ever knowing or needing to know the original justifications. most of the laws and rules that we follow just regularly are laws that were there when we were born, and they were just by default applied onto us. Yeah. Legal systems operate on authority, not consent. So the world of rules is the world of hierarchical authority. The person underneath doesn't get to give the consent. You're born into it. Many of the laws, of course, the contractual private laws are the ones that will be coming later when we're adults and we add more zones of society into our lives by signing different kinds of contracts, okay? Whether traffic, marriage, etc., etc. Buying a plane ticket is a contract as well, because they have to allow you into the plane, and once they allow you, then they have an obligation, responsibility to get you where they would say they would get you. Laws are always conditional. Remember that each one of these, just like a epigenetic tag goes on and off, the laws similarly are in our minds. The way a law functions is that it's inactive, and then when the condition is right or correct, we switch into action. Some laws are contractual and only imposed once dotted line is signed. That's what I was just saying, right? And usually some time given for review. So that there's an engagement ring, right? The justifications for rules to agree upon in this case are usually outlined, so people know what they're getting into, rather than when you're just born into it, where you actually just have to follow the rules and laws that you were born into. And I'm going to quickly read a little passage that I put into my book, Forces of Society, just because I thought it outlined the world of what I'm going to explore today very well. One thing that free will is not is the laws and rules that it itself emerges through sociocultural systems, right? So free will is what we're all born with, and out of us tinkering and exploring, we find common ground with what we like, and then we create rules and laws to impose back onto our own free will. Okay? Let's think of it that way. As much as our needs drive us to go out there and be free agents in the world, our very needs also enslave us by making us have to go out there and freely serve them back, right? If your body needs to walk, you need to drag yourself out there and go for a walk. We're all bound to what I like to call tunnels of existence, which is what I referenced up here, which we energetically cannot step out of. Even though we can choose which food to pursue today, we cannot choose not to pursue food. See how there's always the middle ground between two forces. The same goes for any other endeavors and needs, all of this ultimately purely in the name of staying alive. Rules and laws emerge to societally package all our essential needs and make sure they continue to be met, because societies are in their essence meant to meet their population's overall needs against the world outside. Okay? So we're all in this together. Let's put it that way. Okay? Now, here are the two forces. It took me a while to put this thing together, because there's a lot of moving parts that are defined very differently. So it's probably going to be very likely that as I start defining things here, that you might start being, oh, hang on, I don't think that's what that word means or not. I'm happy to discuss the breadth of the expression of meaning any word is able to take. What I'm wanting to do is just lock in definitions. So it's not because I want to disagree or, purposefully change meanings to mess with people. I'm actually just more so trying to do the opposite, to lock in into one definition. And I think that most definitions that I found actually seem to serve themselves pretty well to create this framework, to kind of understand the world. And this has helped me, and I hope it'll help you to understand the world better out there in terms of how it actually functions, okay? So we've got two things. We've got the rule of law and rule by law. Now, I purposefully put those down because that's where the word law exists, okay? Or differently said, liberty and order, okay? So the rule of law, by definition, when you look it up, is what we're allowed to do. It's what I would, and best word that I found is liberty, whereas the rule by law is when you have to follow the law, which is the order. And those are the forces of society, two forces of society that I want to focus on today. If your participation in a branch of society is granted, you can freely participate, which is rule of law, but within the set boundaries, which is rule by law. Laws come in the form of to which degree you're allowed to do something, it is always an interplay between these two forces, the allowing force and guiding force. Okay? Two governing systems in opposition. Okay? So the forces are governing systems, and one is guiding you. Now notice how guidance can be understood in so many different ways. You can understand it as a barrier that is disallowing you to do something, or you can understand it as a helping hand showing you the right way, right? In both contexts, there's a force that's acting upon whatever you may have wanted to do, but it's not what you're doing. It's what is being presented that is happening, okay? Let's explore each one of them, and I'd like to give about, 12 different examples of how to understand these two systems, or these two forces that are basically the yin and yang to each other, okay? Number one, rule of law, laws that regulate liberty. So this is not liberty per se. The law is the one that acts in the name of liberty, okay? Or in the name of the feminine. It supports feminine. And of course, that's the world of yin. And then there's rule by law, which is laws that regulate order. Okay? That is what I would define by, in the largest umbrella definition, as the masculine, which is yang. And those two have been written about even in spiritual books, and this is where I'm trying to bring connection between the world of how spiritual world understands this and how pragmatically it actually works. Okay, so different words for the rule of law or the world of liberty and feminine are liberty, acceptance, allowance, privilege, right? Non-punitive, right? So you can get scot-free even if you did something that's not allowed per se. Although in the liberty world, everything is allowed, right? It's free flow, right? Whereas in the world of order, we got orders and directives, responsibility, right? This is a privilege and responsibility are kind of like two opposites from that angle, right? We got restriction, compulsion, mandating, and things being imposed on us, right? What the rule of law or liberty does is regulates and attends to the feminine energy or phenotype expression. Now notice that it's wanting to support a specific phenotype expression of the organism itself. Okay? In this case, the phenotype expression of wanting to just be libertiful. Okay? Whereas the rule by law regulates and attends to the masculine energy or phenotype expression, right? Which we're all born with. Male and females alike. Doing what one feels like or the needs one is driven by. Right? Versus doing something that you were told to do, even if not feeling the need. You might feel the need. You might be like, yeah, this is a great rule. I love it. I'm safer or whatnot. Or you might not have the need. Right? Having the right to do something or to not do something. Okay? Liberty becomes privilege in this case, right? It is privilege. It's a synonym, really. Versus having to do something or having to not do something, right? Because you have to look at both sides. Sometimes you're not allowed to do something, and sometimes you're compelled to do something. The right to do what one wants, the right to be as one is, freedom from liability. Okay? And then 5, which means that even the law will support the individual to have liability over something, right? Even if they might have done it. The right thing to do, the right way to be, having to take responsibility. Okay? These are the mantras of the two systems, or the two worlds, the forces. Legislating the branch of expression for human needs that we as a majority like. Okay? And then, same thing, legislating the branch of expression for human needs that we as a majority dislike. So, if there's people jaywalking in the middle of a highway, and there's a lot of casualties, we will not like that. It protects individuals' boundary from governing body overreach. Okay, this is important now. The governing body is made to self-regulate, meaning that this law, which supports human liberty, let's put it that way, is protecting from the governmental, which technically is, even though it's created of human, groups, the laws that are created are just impositions more than human needs. They're inspired by the populace down below. That's why it comes back, right? But it can become too much, too imposed, in which case the law from underneath gives rights to the people against government overreach. Okay. On the other side, we have where the rule by law protects societal governing boundaries from an individual's overreach. The individual is made to self-regulate, so you can't go and rob a bank, right? Number 8, law that allows one to behave or express oneself however one wants, okay, and also directs others to have to tolerate it. That's the big one, and be respectful and prevent intolerance. Okay, and then so that's the pragmatic way of how the rule of law would function in order to promote liberty, right? And then 8, laws that direct everyone to accept a specific way of behaving, expressing. The individuals have to tolerate the direction. So they're tolerating the direction here, right? Whereas up here, they have to be tolerant and respectful of the individuals themselves. See how the tolerance is either with the people or with the governing body, right? Others don't have to tolerate the disobedient, right? So this is when the society can turn on you if you are not following the rules. Your closest ones could turn on you. Number 9, have the right to be able to participate in branches of society. Behave however you want, but within the objective boundaries and limits. Okay, so you can totally be free flowing while within the boundary of the zone society. Okay? The inability to participate in branches of society. Don't behave outside of societal boundaries and limits. So if you're behaving a certain way, you won't be allowed in society, right? So you can do it outside of the society if the side of the society permits it, right? Constitutional law, criminal law. These are examples of fundamental rights, all equal under the law, keep politics out of course, fair trials, etc., etc. Okay? Whereas this one is administrative law, tax law, criminal law. Okay? Well, the criminal law, there's crossovers as well. Okay? I was just trying to give some examples of different kinds of laws that we can come across in the world out there. Individualistic thinking is born out of this branch of governance, right? So individualistic thinking is because it promotes liberty and allows for self-expression, in which case one has to kind of learn oneself. Whereas number 11 is surrogate decision-making, is born out of this branch of governance. So you're told what to do, and that's what you do. Okay? And finally, the law compels you to stand alone, take responsibility, and make your own way, not rely on others. Okay? And I put from here because it's really interesting how he was talking about father and mother love, and how the feminine love will accept you for whoever you are, whereas the father love you had to earn. And what was good about father love was that you could earn it. You could actually work toward it and achieve it. Whereas if you never have mother love, you can never attain it because it's unconditional. I always thought that was profound when he wrote that. And that's basically what we're playing with here. Two different forces yet again. In the masculine world, the law compels you to be part of and dependent on a societal organization. Trust them and do as they ask. Don't rely on yourself. Okay? So it's quite opposite. Okay. Now let's jump through a few quick examples. Okay. Traffic. As we said, the imposed structure would actually be the masculine order around, whereas in between, and that's why I put wiggles, they're not really visible here because of the dots, but basically you can swirl your way in the car if you want, like within your lines. It might look a bit odd, it might be suspicious, but you're at the liberty to drive within your lane in any kind of shape or form you like. In the traffic sphere, one has to keep on moving on the road between the minimum and maximum speed order, versus one can move at any speed in the given window, which is liberty. Okay? So not only can you move left or right, there's also a window of slow and fast. And within that, as long as you're within the same parameter, you can go at any speed in between. You're at liberty. But once you step out, the order will have a problem with you. Although even the speeding is an interesting leeway, which the conditionals come into play here, because everything is a conditional, and you can push a condition further by running a bit over of the speed limit, or for that matter, driving slower than the minimum speed limit. Have to stop at a traffic stop and red lights, that's order. Drive through green lights and places with no signage, that is liberty. right? And you'll notice at the peripheries of the traffic, every time you leave the city, come to a small village, all of a sudden signs start getting like a hologram. They start disappearing, and eventually it becomes one-on-one, right? That becomes like an egalitarian system, if you will. Joyride is a full expression of liberty in an order-driven zone of traffic. So even though you're following all the laws and rules, you can sit in your car and drive out there for whatever reason you want to drive and for however long you want to drive for. So the liberty is also in the length of stay. A person driving in the right side of the road at speed that is technically legally allowed to impose the speed limit onto the ones behind them. It is within the liberty rule law boundary bubble. It is the ceiling. What this means is that if a person is driving on the left side of the road, which is on the fast side of the road, at the speed limit, and people behind that person cannot pass anymore, that person is legally entitled to stay there. That's their right. Even though people usually, when they take over, although taking over usually implies that you'll go over the speed limit. This is where the conditionals come in, right? Nevertheless, the mere act of following the ceiling rule or law limit, even if it's to the detriment of others being slowed down, is something that won't be punished. You were going at speed, right? At the ceiling speed limit, right? Then we got society's public space, which is number one, right? In a pedestrian area, here I'll give you an example of a pedestrian area. Blocking walking lanes, which is similar to the world of cars and traffic. Blocking walking lanes is not allowed, and even loitering, similar to traffic laws. That's order. Meaning that somewhere you can't just stand around all day. Like you have to keep moving. Loitering is not allowed. Similarly, you can't just stop in the middle of a truck. It's actually illegal. Versus one can walk freely and stand in public space, which is liberty, right? So that's within the window, you can do whatever you want. And then number 2 and 7, we got mating and coupling on the family, and I'll show number 7 later. You have the right to make babies, right? That's the liberty. Versus once you sign a traditional marital contract, you get obliged to create offspring or babies, which is the order, right? There's the expectation arises, and we'll look at the how they have a sliding scale and how they're the judgments are implemented later. Okay, but I want to point out that the same act can be seen as an act of one exercising liberty, which is they want to have and have the right to have a baby if they want to, versus order, which is one having to have a baby, male or female, being compelled to have a baby of their own, regardless whether they want it or not. Okay? All right, here we go. I would like to explore now boundaries of society. Okay? Boundaries of society, let me just have a look. Yes, is where the zone of society doesn't exist, and then there's the inside part of the society. And how does the boundary work? The transition. How do you enter it? Right? They're what I like to call edges of law, or where are the red lines? That's what I like to ask is that where's the red line, right? And at which point have you crossed the red line? It's kind of like when you play tennis, where did the ball hit when they're trying to figure it out, right? Where how precise do you go to make a decision? Where's your truncation, cut off? And that's our borders. I like to think of them as transitions. It's not really a strict border. There's always a transition. Okay, can be a gradual transitioning, of course, like a large gradual transition. It doesn't have to be a strict border per se. A traverse is another word. Segueing, it's a crossing. You can think of it as crossing into the other world, into the zone. Transitioning barrier. So transitioning barrier is probably like the most kind of wholesome one. There's a barrier and you have to transition through it. It is the boundary between the two opposing forces, liberty and order, between allowing the rule of law and directives driven by rule of law, right? So it's like the world where the law is protecting you doing whatever you want, and then crossing into the zone where you're not allowed, where the order is closing you in. That's what creates the bubble or the zone of society. It is expressed in direct contact where the law expresses itself. It is per case. For example, crossing the road. What this means is that the zone of society is created in the act of going out there and wanting to cross the road. That's where it expresses, and that's where you can see what's where. It's in our behaviors. Just like the expression of our, metabolic or physiological expressions is a result of a bunch of proteins being moving around in our bodies and doing what they need to do. How wide is the bubble of allowance, right? How much does the liberty take? If it's relatively small, its rule of law shrinks, right? So the rule of law, where it's liberty, is shrinking. And rule by law grows because it's coming down, like it's becoming bigger up here, right? And vice versa. As there's more liberty, the rule by law is kind of getting less of a say, if you will, okay? Boundaries of the boundary. So even the boundaries themselves can have the boundary. And this is the ceiling I was just talking about, right? There's other players in the game. Are you cutting someone off? Are you being courteous? So cutting someone off means that you're infringing into their liberty. Whereas if you're being courteous, you actually have the right of way, but you're extending them the liberty, right? You see, and those are the edges of the actual boundary, where there's liberty fully and when there's order. So, if you have the full liberty and you allow somebody, you're giving them the liberty instead of you taking it, and vice versa up here, right? Courtesy, there we go. When you have the right of way, but you give way. Word of chivalry and being nice is how that would be defined. Meaning they have the right of way, but they're extending it to you, versus cutting off when you don't have right of way, but you still take it, okay? Even though it's not yours. You're imposing your own rule of law through your libertyful expression into somebody else's right.